Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, K Nageswar Rao, known as KNR, shares his story and experience related to the 4 threads in his career, starting as an individual contributor, growing as a team leader, and doing technical work. And the second thread being leading an R&D and product teams in India for large multinational organizations. The third thread that he talks about is about driving innovation culture. And the fourth thread is about influencing people's lives through process, systems, and also through coaching. And how he quit a corporate job to follow his passion, to continue to help individuals grow through the initiative called What is My North. We also talk about how he switches between working with people and with machines, and the importance of the ability to pay attention to detail and not jumping to conclusions. He also talks about humility as a strong characteristic of a great leader and whether humility is a trainable skill. He continues to talk about creating an environment where people want to help others and the role of constructive or creative dissonance in nurturing great communities. Goes on to talk about creating a startup kind of culture within a large organization and extending that to aspects related to product leadership. And he shares his career tips for people considering a career in IT as well as for mid-career professionals. Listen on. Hi, KNR. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi, Shiv. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, I've known you as a very good storyteller and also an entertainer in many of our interactions, the way you kind of share things. I'm looking forward to a wonderful conversation about your story and, of course, interspersed with whatever other stories.
Sure.
So we'll start with a self-introduction, how you got into IT, what has been your career trajectory, etc., and then take it from there.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you very much for having me here. I think it's a great opportunity for me to be here and share some of my perspectives. So let me start by briefly introducing myself. I was part of the IT industry for 34 years. I will explain the was part of the previous statement shortly. But anyway, if I were to describe my career, I would say it was made up of 3 to 4 major threads or flavors. So let me explain those 3 or 4 threads. First one is, I think my entire career has been around system software, developing and delivering system software products, either directly or as an individual contributor in my early career days, or as a person who was leading teams that were doing that. My first job was in Indian telephone industries, where I was involved in delivering an embedded software for the data link layer, providing interconnectivity between different parts of a digital switch. In this case, I think switch is a misnomer because each switch by itself was a huge digital telephone exchange. Right. So when I said I wrote software which was connecting these switches, it was basically interconnection between these different digital exchanges. And the exotic part of this job in ITI was we traveled to exotic places in India, remote places, to install or commission these switches for India's army. So in fact, many of those we were not even allowed to talk about which places they were and things like that. So it was a very enriching experience, not only in terms of this travel and all that, but in terms of the learning that I got. Since it was the first job, there was a lot of enthusiasm and all that. After ITI was Tata Unisys. I don't know if you remember, Shiv. You were the reason I got an opportunity to work in PUL. You actually interviewed me. And I don't know if you are happy or you regret about it. But that was a good break in my career. Like while ITI gave me the early foundation for a software career, PUL is where I picked a lot of things, not just technological knowledge and awareness, but also working with people, the culture. I mean, one of the earliest role models for me was Gopalan, who we all know. And he has always been in the back of my mind when I was progressing through my career. So excellent people, excellent culture. And that was, I think, the beginning of my, perception and learning about how to be in a corporate and how to conduct oneself and how to be successful. So that was my second stint. Of course, TUL is where I became truly an operating systems software person, because I was working in this Unisys project where we had to support Unix SVr4, the operating system. Right? And like that was probably the most exciting project I've ever worked on, because it not only gave me that flavor of working in system software, operating systems, the core operating system code and things like that. It led me to the next later part of my career also. So after Tata Unisys, say about 9 years, I moved into Sun Microsystems in the Solaris OS group. And this is where we created the Open Solaris community in India. And so those were exciting days. So that is where I interacted with a lot of people, colleges and various parts of academics in creating this community in India. And we also created the second largest community in the world after the US for Open Solaris. So that has continued to be the thread in my career. Then, of course, after Tata Unisys, after Sun, I moved into Unisys to continue. I came back to Unisys is what I should say. The last 5 years of my career were in Unisys, where I worked again in the operating systems group, leading the development center in India. The second thread, which kind of this segues into in my career, has been about leading product development and R&D divisions of some big companies like Unisys and Sun Microsystems in India. Setting up and growing these R&D groups has been, I would say, the highlight of my career. While it threw many challenges at me, it was a great opportunity to build what I call as the growth organizations, driving a shared vision, motivating others to join forces to deliver the vision, and connecting with people and being part of their career and their lives. Right? In fact, we were talking about this before. The people element of this career has been something that I have been very proud of. The ability to work with people, ability to carry people with us, and those kind of stuff. And now, talking of offshore development centers, I would say India has made significant strides in producing successful captives, but there are still challenges. And one of the things that stands out in my mind is fundamental challenges that we encountered maybe 20-25 years ago still exist. And I think while the industry bodies like NASSCOM are trying to change that culture, change that flavor, a lot of it is in the hands of leaders, is to kind of get rid of those challenges, overcome those challenges, and make it a successful presence in the offshore captives. The third thread in my career has been around driving an innovation culture. Now, I have been focusing more on creating innovation culture in terms of creating the frameworks and creating the mindset and those kind of stuff in the offshore centers that I've been part of. Like when I talk about the innovation culture, I'm also happy that I was able to contribute to the larger ecosystem through being part of NASSCOM. When I say the larger ecosystem, it is like creating communities that create innovation or create structures and culture and framework for innovation and those kind of stuff. So that has been one of the things that I've kind of continued to nurture in my career. The last one, of course, has been the opportunity I've had to influence people's lives in a positive way, either through formal processes like the practices and the systems in companies, or through informal coaching and discussions and things like that. In fact, very early in my career, I realized that I enjoyed working with people and had the potential to help. And about a year ago, I quit my day job to pursue exactly this thread of helping people, to start my practice called What's My North. This is what I meant when I said I was part of the industry and no longer is. But actually, though I'm not working for any one company right now, I believe I'm still part of the IT industry, since all of the people I'm working with are from the industry. So I feel I'm still contributing to the industry by developing people in the industry for the industry. While technology expertise is crucial for success, I think the industry needs to pay more attention to developing and helping people grow. So that's a summary of what I've been doing in the industry.
Yeah, wonderful, KNR. Just to answer the question you asked about our first meeting, and you said about recruitment, obviously, if there was any doubts or regrets, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? It has always been wonderful. So multiple questions are, I would say, curiosity questions that are triggered by what you said. On one hand, you did talk about your interest in working with people, the culture and helping people, etc. And then you also mentioned that you have been working on operating systems, embedded systems, and so on, right? So how do you switch between, are these two different modes in the first place? About being focused more on the things that are not seen and then trying to put something into the hardware to make it work, etc., versus actually interacting with people?
It's a great question. I mean, as you think, I'm thinking what could be the connection, but I think this has always been something that I realized, which is both of them involve systems thinking. Right? I think that is a common thread I see between working on embedded systems or software, I mean, system software or hardware, connectivity between those, or working with people. What I mean by systems thinking in this case is the ability to recognize patterns, the ability to come out with, what do you say, the archetypes or stereotypes that exist, and being able to elevate things from incidental or situational happenings to distilling them or kind of consolidating them into patterns. And a lot of problems or situations that we encounter in both spaces, I think if we are able to, if we are capable of bringing them up to this level and synthesizing them, we can conquer them. And so at a very high level, I think it is this ability to understand people from deriving patterns out of what is happening, and also understanding systems from deriving patterns out of what is happening is a common ground. So when I work with people, while I have some structures and systems in place to carry those discussions, a lot of the time it's about what we call as the Socratic thinking or Socratic questioning, where you keep asking open-ended questions and let people discover themselves and let people come out with their own wisdom. While that doesn't, I mean, it may happen with AI and all that going forward, but a lot of working with systems requires us to derive those patterns is what I believe. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, probably similar question or related question. I'm just trying to see multiple facets that you had, and then what could possibly be some connections, like you said, probably in abstracting from something specific. You talked about your experience of going to remote locations, installing and all that, which is probably very, very high touch kind of a thing with actual users, actual conditions under which your products are used, etc. But when you're working on an operating system, or when you're working on a product, say, based in India, are there any limitations because you may not have that kind of a connect with the users or the actual conditions under which it's going to be used? And how do you kind of again, adjust to that or abstract that? And then I have a follow-up question based on this answer.
Sure. I think there is a difference, or there is a connect in how you look at these things. For example, when you are in a situation where your customer is next to you and you're actually talking to the customer on things, how they are happening, what problems they're facing, and things like that, your perspective is totally very different. You are able to understand things that you may not have thought of, the kind of situations that you would never have imagined. I think that is, in fact, this is probably a small, big digression, but many times what I have found is that when we struggle, this is the context between working in, for example, say in the US or in India in a setup like this. what are some of the challenges that we face? What are some of the issues that we have never been able to overcome? I wouldn't say never, never is probably too strong, but most of the time we struggle to overcome is lack of client or customer perspective, lack of client or customer experience. It's however much we try, being in a time zone where the customer is not has been a big challenge for us. So how do we solve that? We have tried multiple ways to do that, having people on site, going to customer locations, working with them for some time, coming back. But I think that is one aspect which I would say is very important, and that is one of the things that has been a big challenge for us. When I say us, it is people working on software products, whether it is system software or application software or whatever, the lack of customer connect. So if we can solve that, if there are ways to, I mean, we have tried practical ways of addressing that, but I think there is a lot of mindset issue also here. Without going into specific details of what those mindset issues are, I think the acceptance level of someone totally remote to be able to solve somebody's problem has to be better. And that is something that we have always struggled with. The talent, the ability to solve those problems, and the knowledge and awareness, there is no lack. But it is this aspect of one, being able to understand what the client situation is accurately. And there is a second aspect, which I think is a cultural difference. I don't know, maybe this is my perception. That is the ability to, or the attention to detail. I, at least in my experience, have found that we, the people in India, while working on such situations, seem to jump to conclusions faster than required. The ability to pay attention to detail, really look at what is happening, it comes at a very, very, I would say, later stage in career. Having gone through this kind of work repeatedly, having faced these kind of challenges, people seem to learn. But if we are able to bring in that discipline in our people who develop software, that will save a lot of energy for it. So these are the two things that come to my mind when it comes to kind of being in front of a customer and not being in front of a customer.
The corollary to that is, yes, this is something that you can practice as KNR.
Right.
But then when you were building teams for product development, what were some things that worked or that didn't work in creating a similar empathy, so to say, for the users in the team?
So I was kind of thinking about it from a point of view of somebody who is leading an organization like this or building an organization like this, where you have to really bring people together, people who are thought workers, right? There are three things that come to my mind. One is, so when you said, how do you get people to create this kind of a discipline or culture? I think it's absolutely important for whoever is building those teams to develop and articulate a very clear vision that can be easily shared by all. That shared vision, I mean, particularly in cases where I've had more than 700, 800 people in the organization, it becomes absolutely important for people to know what they are doing and why they are doing it. And that articulation should come from the leader. I think being able to articulate, clearly develop and articulate a vision to the larger organization and making sure that it reaches everybody is half the problem solved. The second part of it is, of course, motivating the members of the organization so that the vision is accepted, adopted, and they are actually working towards that. That is the harder part, because each individual is different and you will have all kinds of people. But as a leader, rallying your teams to adopt and accept that vision and work towards it is important, which also means that you need to be ready to address different perspectives. It's not like just because you said 100% of the people are going to accept it. So you need to also be ready to accept contrary views, be challenged, and steer the organization towards that. Openness, transparency, humility of all. Basically, I think one of the characteristics of any strong leader is humility. And if we are not able to be humble in front of the organization, in front of others, it becomes challenging, because you will face challenges that you will not foresee. and many times you will be blindsided by what you don't know. Right. The third one is, of course, while it is difficult in larger organizations, being able to establish a connection with people and being authentic with them. I think these are the humility, being able to connect with people and being authentic are some of the people aspects, I think, that bring an organization together and make it successful. But having a clear shared vision and communicating it and getting it accepted is probably the most important.
So is humility a trainable skill?
I think so. While natural humility is, in my view, higher in the rung, I think it can be taught, or people can learn humility, because I mean it's not an inherent characteristic, is what I feel. It doesn't have to be. People can be taught how to be humble and the values of humility. In fact, I'm sure you would have read this book, Good to Great, by Jim Collins, where he talks about the success of companies being measured based on their longevity. And when they went and analyzed the traits of CEOs of those companies which were successful through longevity, he found that one of the most common traits was humility. I don't believe that every one of them had humility naturally. While that's a corollary, I think humility can also be taught. At least we should talk about it. I believe that not many of us talk about it in organizations. The other side of it, I would say, is unfortunately, we find more and more people getting strong-headed as they progress in their career, which I think needs to be. Another thing to do that is to actively talk about the value.
In fact, that was crossing my mind as you were explaining this. The question was, when you talk about innovation, when you talk about creating something probably that doesn't exist or challenges the status quo and stuff like that, do you need a little bit of, for lack of some other term, I'm saying maybe arrogance? Or where does humility play when it is something new that you are trying to explain? You are so either convinced about it or you feel that this is the right thing to do. So where does innovation and humility come together?
So I look at it from two different points of view. I think that the context is different in these two cases. Where you are dealing with people or you're dealing with organizations and you are serving the organization, humility becomes paramount. When you look at creating something or being technologically strong or innovative, I think I would rather term it as confidence than arrogance. I think that confidence is important, but that doesn't have to be arrogance. I think that is where people get mixed up, and sometimes we find really strong technical people becoming arrogant and aggressive, which spoils the dynamics. I mean, when we talk about uniting a large organization, having a common focus, common vision, and all that stuff, traits like arrogance and aggressiveness don't have it. People need to learn to work with each other. People need to learn to support each other. Many times, I always believe that there is enough for everybody. So there is no need for competition. However, our organizations are tuned to be competitive, right? They encourage competition. They encourage one over the other. So these are some of the things I believe need to be brought into the organization dynamics. So to your question, the direct answer is it probably is not arrogance, but confidence is required. But in a larger organization context, particularly leaders need to demonstrate humility.
Yeah, I guess confidence is a much better word. I was just searching for that word, which is also a nice segue into a third pattern that I tried to kind of form as you were explaining things, which is about enabling connections or coalitions, whichever way. Whether it was the switches that you made talk to each other, or later when you said that you built a community for Solaris and stuff like that. It is all about enabling those connections. In two curiosity questions, was it easier to connect computers than to connect people?
I wouldn't say so. I think they're equally complicated, but they require different kind of approach is what I feel. When you talk about connecting computers, I think it's more about knowing what you should do and doing it accurately, minimizing the failures, minimizing the flaws. Whereas when it comes to connecting people, I think it's all about creating that environment where people feel comfortable. In fact, when we had this team in Sun Microsystems working on Solaris, when I look back, what made the team successful? What made the team work so well together? I think it was the environment that we created, the atmosphere that we created, where people felt comfortable helping others. It wasn't like, oh, if I help that person, I am going to lose something. It was more of how do we collectively make this thing successful? Because there was serious, to give a context, that team had a lot of, what do you say, finger pointing from the other time zones. We were part of 3 time zones, right? And the other 2 time zones were much more advanced. They were in the job for quite some time. And this was a very fledgling team that was coming up. And the expectations were very high, but the capability was not that high. So we had to, while we were working on the capabilities, we had to make sure that as a team, we succeeded. And that is where I think creating that environment, creating that shared vision, and letting people understand that it is not competition, but it is collaboration that's going to make us successful was important. So to answer your question directly, I think in both cases, obviously, I think you knew what you were talking about. In connecting machines, obviously the skill sets and the capabilities are different, but here the dynamics are much more important. And I believe creating that transparency, that space for people to grow is what is important in connecting people.
In a related corollary is we say that you have to consciously, in a controlled way, promote either call it the constructive or creative dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
So while forming a community, how can you enable that as well?
Sure. So when I said you create the space for people to be transparent and collaborative with each other, it doesn't mean everybody rubs the other person's back. That environment itself created the opportunity for people to conflict each other, argue with each other, and that dissonance that you talked about. See, what happens in this case, I believe, is it becomes natural for them to bring it up without any fear. So when you have an environment where people can speak up their minds, dissonance also can be easily handled. And it is absolutely important to encourage that. I think thank you for bringing that up, because it's not all goody-goody. There were conflicts, but people, I believe, were able to handle it in a much more humane way than making it a totally disastrous situation.
The other thing I recall is your 4th thread of coaching, mentoring, and doing that. How did you have to adjust your own personal either styles of thinking or working when you were playing a role of a manager or a leader in an organization or of a team versus being a coach?
I think there's a lot of commonality between what you do there and what you do here. It is compassion. Even so, when I said, I think I mentioned that one of the things that I felt very proud about in my career is being able to influence people's lives in a positive way. I think that also came from this fundamental need to be compassionate to people, to help others. I think I realized that much earlier, that this is something that I was good at and I really wanted to do, combined with my, I won't say passion, but desire to teach. So these two kind of together made me realize that this is a space that I should be working in. And so about 10, 12 years ago, I went through a certification for coaching. So that was more to prepare from a structured way to be a coach. But to your point, I think it is important. There is commonality between being a good leader and being a coach. In fact, when I said structured way of learning coaching, it's more about learning that you don't solve others' problems. You actually let them bring out their wisdom and find their own solution, become more responsible than always blaming and those kind of stuff. In fact, I think this applies very much in the context that we were talking about organizations. We all carry a lot of biases, blocks, and blind spots. So a coach's job is to kind of bring that out and show people what is going on and not try to solve their problems. I figured that if I were interested in doing this, I had to make sure that I do it in a proper way. From that point of view, it kind of steered me towards this career. Yeah, I think it's a common thing that both being a leader in an organization and doing this kind of work requires common traits, which is about caring for people.
You spoke about product innovation, creating probably ecosystems and so on. These are all terms that we hear very commonly today associated with the startup world or the startup culture, saying entrepreneurship, etc. How was it doing all these things within the construct of a company or a larger organization?
I think that's a very interesting question because there are constraints within an organization. That's why when I started talking about it, I said we were working on creating an innovation culture and hoping that that will lead to innovation. That is the reality. Because while I can say that Sun Microsystems is known for its innovative culture. So there was not much we had to do in terms of building that atmosphere. In spite of that, there is always this constraints about getting somebody's ideas through. That is where the work we did helped. In terms of creating that ecosystem, when I say ecosystem, creating that framework, when somebody has a good idea, how do you ensure that it is heard by the right people? So creating those pathways, creating those systems, putting them in place so that nobody has to be at the mercy of somebody else. And there is a system or a structure through which these ideas can go through is a big part of the work that we did, both in Sun Microsystems and in Unisys. Unisys was probably because it was a later time in the cycle. There were very established innovation systems in place, processes in place. So I think innovation and process are kind of oxymorons, but go against each other. But at the same time, you need that support system. That support system was in place, and it was more about creating that, what do you say, culture to think differently that we had to work on. So to answer your question, if there are companies which have these systems, and nowadays, if you go around, you will find that every company says they have an innovation system, innovation process, innovation culture, encouraging innovation and all that stuff, which is good. And that I think is because of the work that has been done by a lot of people in the last 10, 20 years to bring that kind of an environment here. And also the startup culture has helped. I think these go hand in hand. The shift from delivering services to creating products, the shift from doing what is being told to doing something new. All these are shifts that have happened in the industry, not just in one or two companies. And bodies like NASSCOM have really helped. They actually, I mean, when I said part of NASSCOM, I was also part of creating that ecosystem. It was because NASSCOM said, look, individual companies are doing these things. Can we bring together, look at best practices and create a common platform where we can enhance this culture of innovation? So I think all of that has helped. Yes, individual companies have their own idiosyncrasies which create some constraints. But if we know how to work around them, you can still create that culture, create that spirit.
You also mentioned that you love teaching.
Yeah.
And you've also been doing some work in the product leadership team, at least in Bangalore. You find that there are a lot of people who are in startups or wanting to start up and talk about products and doing that. Do we need to enlarge the scope to say business leadership or outcome leadership than just product leadership? Or is that something that is already taken care of in the way in which people are being trained to become product leaders?
I think it is happening. And so specifically product leadership, the answer to your question is, I don't think we should mix these two. Both are important, both are required. And about product leadership, I think in the last 10 to 15 years, there is a lot of progress in India in creating product leaders, right? Either through growing in their jobs or through proper qualification. Like, for example, there are these institutes like Institute of Product Leadership, which has been there in Bangalore for about 15 years, which has been focusing on building product management, product leadership capabilities in India. Now, when it comes to applying those is where I think there may be some gaps which need to be filled in terms of product leaders going and supporting the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. Even that is happening, but I think you kind of brought out that distinction, which is business leaders based on their experience are trying to mentor startups and such innovative groups. But how do we bring in full product leadership flavor into the startup kind of ecosystem is something that probably needs to be filled more. But the capabilities are being built.
So do you have any personal stories of highlights or what you have enjoyed being in IT? Or what kind of was the pull to when you said you were in IT, right? What made that in and to where?
So frankly, my getting into IT was because my brother told me so. He just said, look, networking is hot, get into that. I think we were all like that at that time, not too much visibility into what was available, but that's how I got into IT. But I think it was a fit. It was a good fit, because when you asked what did you enjoy or what were the highlights, there are two things that come to my mind. The first one is the opportunities to solve problems. I enjoyed problem solving. So throughout my career, at least when I was an individual contributor, all my work involved solving problems that were created by somebody else. I'm meaning the technical problems.
Yeah.
The kind of challenge that it throws at you is absolutely exhilarating. So that was something that I always enjoyed, solving very challenging, critical problems, particularly when the customer is on your neck. Right. So those situations were really challenging and interesting. That is one thing that I always enjoyed. The second, obviously, is the opportunity to work with diverse people. That I don't think I can get that anywhere else. This created that opportunity to work with different people from different parts of IT industry, and hence people of different natures and things like that. So these were the two things that really helped me, or I really enjoyed.
I normally like to conclude these conversations with tips, career tips from the guest for two segments of people. One, those who are aspiring to get into IT or just starting out in IT. And the second segment is what we may call as the mid-career IT professionals.
Sure.
Who sometimes either want to decide on whether they should continue to be technical or managerial, etc., or probably switch from IT to something else, etc. It could be multiple things that they may be considering.
Sure.
So what would be your guidance for them?
I think for both sections, there are some common guidances, tips, and there are some specific tips. For the people who are just starting in the IT industry, I would say keep yourself completely abreast of what's going on. Like, for example, today, while people come out of colleges, I mean, this is a common complaint from the industry, that while they have learned some things, they don't know what they need to do in the corporate world, right? But I'm not going there. I'm talking about, as a person who wants to succeed in IT, be abreast of what is going on, what kind of technologies are coming, and don't get stuck at what you are doing. Right? For example, today, Web3, everybody is talking of Web3, but how many of us know what actually Web3 is and what it takes? Now, maybe a beginner cannot enter Web3 right now, but if there are things that are happening in the new technologies that you are interested in, how will you know if you don't understand what's going on? So keeping an open eye, keeping an open mind, and looking for what is happening in the industry, what kind of technologies are coming, because in the early stages, nothing else matters. Being strong, technical person is important in the early stages. So that is one. For people in mid-career, this is something that we do in career coaching that I do. I mean, in addition to individual coaching, I also work with a couple of other institutions where we do career coaching for mid-career people. And one of the things I emphasize there is it's not too late for you to identify and follow your passion. Because many of us are in IT industry. I wouldn't say many, but some of us probably are for the wrong reasons. But it's not going to really keep you happy if you are continuing in what you are doing for not the right reasons. So, and the right reason is basically identifying what your passion and purpose is and steering your career towards that. It's not too late, even if you are in mid-career positions, follow your passion. That's why I said this is applicable even to people who are beginning, but more applicable to people in the later parts of their career. So if at all there is one message I would like to send, it is try and identify and follow your passion.
Yeah, thanks, KNR, on that great note and very simple formula, probably very difficult to actually find your passion. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure you have a lot more stories that you wanted to keep for the next time. That gives us an opportunity to connect again. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Shiva. I'm honored to be part of this.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
If you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.